Now we're going to take a quick look at the IWM, the small caps. So here's the weekly chart for IWM. Essentially what we've seen since the beginning of 2021 is essentially sideways action. The very end of 2021, we saw a fake out to a breakout, and then essentially a bearish move down to the beginning or middle of 2022, and essentially just sideways action. The concern for the IWM obviously would be if you break below that 150 level. You have no idea where the price could go there, but I guess this was essentially the top in 2020 before the big COVID crash. So you maybe have support here. That's a concerning looking chart. I think it has a lot of banks inside of IWM, or at least more regional banks than the SPY or the Qs, obviously. So this is going to be reflected in the concern and sentiment in the market at the moment. Let's take a look at the daily chart. The daily chart is essentially a range trader's dream here. If you've been playing the 200 level all the way down to probably what is the 160s or maybe high 150s, you've essentially had fun. You've made a ton of money either selling calls at the top, selling puts at the bottom, buying puts at the top, buying calls at the bottom, whatever it is your specific trading strategy is. This has essentially been a range bound move. I would be concerned about this because the recent move that we saw on Friday looks a little concerning. It doesn't look like a bottom when something breaks below. I'm not a big chart candle, voodoo guy. When I look at that, it doesn't look great. Let's look at the daily sentiment here. Using this as a proxy of what kind of price action we're seeing under the surface, we can see that based on where we are, I might want to buy this once we see a little bit of bullish price action. Now that I look at the sentiment, we are way down there. The bullish sentiment's at 40%, and it's come off of a low essentially of 35%. And as I mentioned earlier, these oscillators can't really get above 60. Like that got to 64 and then promptly came down. It got to 60 or 58 here, then promptly came down. We really can't get below 40 very much, generally, unless you have a crisis, you have a banking crisis. So you'd expect at least some bullish price action from here. So the bullishness is about to break above this moving average, which is a great signal generally for going long, at least for a period of time until there's a break below. Let's look at the weekly. The weekly sentiment here for the IWM looks exactly like the chart. Essentially nothingness, just chop left and right. When we look at how this move has gone since September of 2021, which was directly in here. So this low of September of 2021 was the precursor letting you know that you were going to get at least some move upward. We can see the reflection in it here. This is on the 12th of 2021 and only at 50%. So that really lets you know that even though that was a breakout, that wasn't a very strong one. And then we've just seen it essentially oscillate around 50% ever since. The market wants to be in balance, but when you get moves like this 2020 move, when you saw small caps just absolutely rip from down at 41% up to a sustained 60% for a while here, that's the type of move you're looking for. Or you're looking for the reverse if you want to go short. But when the price action doesn't necessarily align, just because sentiment is bearish doesn't mean that price action is going to align. Markets can levitate for a lot of different reasons, even though everyone in the market is essentially showing like, I don't want this as much as I wanted this before. Let's take a look at the volume here in IWM. The IWM volume, at least on the weekly, we can see a large breakout and looks like an inflection here in IWM volume. That's not a great signal if you're thinking that this is going to be a bearish looking market. Increases in volume generally are bearish. What you want to see is a slow grinding volume as you go higher generally. Let's look at the daily volume. The daily volume, this is a way different look than what we saw on the Qs or the SPY. Volume here in IWM looks higher and looks sustained higher. We are consistently over 40 million shares traded each week, which is a far cry from where the general average was, or is capping out at 40 million. So we'd really want to see volume continue to fall to see any bullish sentiment kind of return. So we'd be looking at very low volume days to potentially buy this, at least me. Now, when we look at the volatility of IWM on the daily, we can see the volatility has continued to break out. This is exactly what you're kind of expecting whenever you see a volatility hit its bottom here, like a 2 or a 0 or a 1. When it starts to break out and correlation goes negative, you expect the price to fall. And that's what the price has been doing. So price has been falling consistently on the daily. If we get a resumption of correlation returning, but then volatility starts to turn over and fall like it did here in February, that is not a great signal because that would be a sustained downtrend, especially on the daily. So look at the weekly volatility here. Weekly volatility looks incredibly low relative to where it came from in 2021 when you were up at nearly 20 vol on the weekly, or even when you were at like 15 vol consistently in 2022 in the summer. We are at probably like 7 or 8 vol. Looks like 6.8 right now. That's very low volatility, and it is falling and correlation is rising. So you would see that currently you're going to have a bearish bias long term. And then when we look at the IWM, at least the trade range from a non-sentiment based weekly, you are at the bottom. I mean, this is a signal, at least to me, based on how I believe in my own indicators, is that I would want to buy this at least for the short term. When I say short term, that could be 2 months. I mean, this is the weekly chart, so you could go all the way back up to 200 very easily. It shouldn't surprise anyone, but that would be a great opportunity to short, it looks like, because it looks like 200 again is essentially a level that you've been able to short since a year ago in 2022. Let's look at it on the daily. One of the things that always shocks me about the reflection of a non-sentiment trade range, how much volatility can actually be expressed here. When you see the two bands get really tight like this, that means volatility has fallen. And when we look up, we can see that this is when volatility was all the way down here at the beginning of March, down at that, I think it was 2. And then when it starts to really expand like this, you see the breakout where the highs go higher, the lows go lower. But the speed is what is always shocking to me, because you'll get these sustained periods where volatility essentially falls and it gets kind of tight. Like volatility is falling, so your range gets really tight. But then you just get this all of a sudden expansion that expands the range. And now your probability of outcomes has gone from what you might expect of 2% range to 5% range. And that is a huge change if, depending on what position you have, how you position the size, and how close your stops are. But this has just been a general breakdown for the weekly review of what I consider to be the key 3 elements of the US stock market. You're looking at the SPYs, the Qs, and IWM. Feel free to like, subscribe, and comment below.